This is day 1 of the June 88 7-day retreat. There were a few things last night that were forgotten to mention. One thing is about this chair that I usually sit on just at the beginning of a round of sitting. And then the rest of that block of sitting during meetings, the chair is empty. Anyone who wishes to sit on that chair, please do so. You don't have to carry the chair to your particular mat, just sit on it in this place. During the talk, it's being moved to the balcony, and then, as has already happened, someone can bring it in. Some people were not clear about where to go after a meeting is over. Whether it's all right to go back into the sitting room, yes, it is. Just proceed quietly to go to the sitting room if you wish. If you wish to remain on the balcony in a chair, that's all right too. Just to avoid a lot of loud walking noise. Also, I forgot to mention that during each block of meetings, I take a rest, during which time I come into this room. This is where most everybody is, and we are in this retreat together. And it's a quite marvelous and relaxing thing to stand near each person without talking. It's the only time I'm with people except for eating time that we're together and don't talk. Sometimes people get nervous and say, "What are you doing when you're standing beside me or behind me?" And the answer is nothing. And we look out the window because it's always beautiful to look out the window. Or just stand there and be quiet. We don't always have to do something, do we? People may feel uncomfortable because maybe they feel their posture isn't good. I'm not interested in your posture. If you're interested, then bring it up in a meeting and we'll talk about it if you wish. But I'm not coming in here to correct or judge people or postures. When I stand there, I usually don't even have my eyes open. Just to be in touch with what's there, that's enough. Last night we already mentioned to sit comfortably for a talk. It's all right if you feel uncomfortable with your legs to change the posture. It's not like during regular rounds of sitting where we ask to agree when we're sitting in this room not to move or change posture for the duration of a round. The talk takes longer, and please feel free to shift your legs or whatever is needed. But can it be done quietly? So as not to disturb oneself and the others in the listening. The talks that are given here are not lectures imparting teachings or information. It's different. It's a looking, questioning and looking at ourselves together. Not with one person knowing more and others knowing less and trying to equalize that knowledge. But looking together. So can one listen differently as when one listens to a lecture where the brain is set to grasp, to remember, to accumulate, to be able to repeat or regurgitate? It's not that kind of listening to grab, but to wonder and look whether what is said is so in one's own life. If one can look at this instant, then it's a marvelous thing to listen and look at the same time, because this is what I'm also doing. So we can meet in looking and listening together, not as a teacher and a student. I'm not into any of those words or ideas or roles. A tremendous burden can fall off of one right from the beginning if one doesn't see oneself as a student and the person who's talking as a teacher. Because with that idea, with that image go all kinds of behavior patterns of meeting together. And palpitations in the waiting line, in the solarium. We also try to call it solarium. Because it's not just waiting for getting in, but looking at the palpitation that arises because one is waiting for something to happen. Or maybe anxious about being judged, or will one come up to snuff? To see that. It's not appropriate, but we react to this present moment with inappropriate responses, which have been conditioned in the past. And so we project the past onto this moment, onto this person, onto ourselves. And that's a burden, to say the least. Not just a burden, it distorts or makes impossible our perception of this moment, this person, oneself as one is meeting and talking, as one is this moment. So can there be a ever-dawning awareness of how we respond in terms of our past conditionings, indoctrinations, education, in the home, in the school, in the church, in the spiritual community, in the peer group, in the books that we read. We become conditioned because we want to be like the hero, want to live like that, and that conditions the mind. So here, in looking at a question that is brought up by a person, that's what matters, is the question that's brought up. That's all that's there when we're looking. I'm not seeing you as this and me, myself as that, but we're looking at the question together. And in that there is no division, needs to be no division, no separation. That's the utter beauty of this work. If we can work like that, together and alone. Seeing images and not being ruled by them, so that they can wither away and there's just what is there under consideration or under one's feet or before one's eyes or inwardly going on in the organism. Just that, and not knowing it. We talked about that last night. If we don't know it from the past, we will find out something new, which is a direct touch without separation. of me and mine, you and yours. We'll, in the course of this retreat, go into this a lot. It'll become clearer. Maybe it's clear now. The topics that are used for talks come from the questions that people ask in meetings. So if you have any question about what is being said, if something is not clear, you see it differently, or you feel it should be taken further, deeper, or you want it repeated, go into it freshly, then please bring that to the meeting. Because this is an ongoing process of exploration. And yet, a warning right away, don't feel you have to bring a question. You don't. Because then, if one feels this way, if a new command is placed into this computer, I must bring a question, and hopefully a better one than the others. We work this way, we have been brought up this way. Then there's anxiety in the solarium before meeting. I don't have this good question yet. I will not come up to my or her expectation. As you enter that room through the 2 doors and close the second door, there's no expectation of what you're going to bring. We'll find out. Maybe there's nothing. What is nothing? What is there when there's nothing to talk about? At least one thinks one has nothing to talk about. There's usually plenty of stuff, but one may be anxious of exposing, afraid of looking at something, and that's why one may not have a question. It's all so taboo inside. But as one doesn't bring anything up, what's the quality of this moment? There's nothing in this whole universe or in our immediate personal relationship of this moment that isn't worth listening to and looking at and wondering about, even if it's not verbalized. I wish to say once more that questions that are brought up in meetings are used often for talk, and not precisely in the way they were stated. I do not remember the precise words that somebody says, and sometimes a question evolves. Other people may ask similar questions and they sort of flow together into one new question. So if what is brought up at the beginning of a talk, as the topic does not quite sound like the question you said, please don't feel that you have not been understood. That may immediately take the mind into different channels, also ancient channels of not having been understood, of being misunderstood, and then one can't listen to what's going on. So can one see immediately what the mind is up to and not get captivated by it, but listen and look to what is actually going on, the talk, the new question. Also, a question is, I try never to put it in a way that any personal identity is revealed. So no indiscretion is being practiced. The questions that we feel are so preciously personal or embarrassingly personal, protectedly personal, are not really. The shadings of it, the particular specific content is personal, but in the broader sense, they're general questions that concern all human beings, that take place. They are about things, phenomena, problems that take place in all human beings, not just in this room or in this country or in this Western civilization, but throughout this world. If we go deep enough, away from the specific to the universal. Fear and anxiety, loneliness, envy and jealousy, anger, rage, hatred and violence, love and joy and compassion are universal. They're not one's own personal property or characteristic, even though one may weigh more in one particular human being than in another, and for that another is stronger in that or more weighted down than another in that. But basically, fundamentally, we're all alike. If one can come to that realization that what one has so much suffered from, partly because one thought it's just me who's like that, everybody else is different, better off, more fortunate, more happy. If one sees that fundamentally we are all steeped in the same psychological movements, all of them originating from the sense of a personal I-ness, me-ness, or self, then there can be a completely different feeling about each other, closely or distantly. Feeling of understanding and compassion, not separation and isolation, and all that grows out of that. Let's get back to what we started with. Say some more about this. We said that this is not a lecture to convey information and not an occasion to convey anything on the basis of any authority. If that could be grasped, not just intellectually, but with our whole being, that there's no authority in what is being said. Because if one sees it as an authoritative statement, one will respond completely different than if one takes it as something that is asked to be looked at, mutually or alone, but not to be taken over, unexamined or untested. We've all, in our upbringing, which has been authoritative, we're all atrophied this capacity to look and see and understand and grasp for ourselves. I don't mean for the sake of the me, for ourselves is just used as a piece of language. meaning not to accept or repeat, believe in, or worship what someone else says who is endowed with authority by the mind. It's so crucial, so vital to talk about this and see it on day one, because one's work will be different. There's nothing said to be accepted or believed in, to be influenced by, although one may be influenced by it, but then can that be detected, how one is influenced by what is being said? And then question whether one can really see whether it's true or not. No one else can tell when this is true. It's being said to us all the time. This is the truth of this statement, of this scripture, of this book. But how do we know? What this man, what this woman says is the truth. He, she is a man or woman of, I don't know what, God or succession of transmission of teachings or truths. How do we know that this is so? Since we don't know, we have to believe it, and because we believe it, we're taken in all the time. We cannot accept truth, we have to see it. What is accepted is a word, a hope, or a belief. And one say, well, this is enough for me. Well then, if that's enough for one, then one will continue with that. And this capacity to see for oneself remains atrophied and atrophies more. We've been raised that way, every one of us. I just listened the other day again. There's a school across from us in the playground, and the teacher was out with kindergartners or first graders. And I could hear ever so often, do what I say, she would say. Skip now, you're supposed to skip now. Little kids, they were glad to be out. They come out very rarely. We just mentioned this, my husband and I, how little the kids are out. Maybe it's tremendous academic pressure to have more time to pump stuff into this brain. But here they were out, running like mad and screaming all over the place. It was a joy to hear this, that they had this opportunity to let out energy and feel unrestrained for a while in this open field there. And then you had to skip, you couldn't run. Well, I don't want to go too far with this. Maybe there was something going on there. It was important. To the teacher, it was important because she had the hassle on her hands all the time because the kids weren't skipping. This example doesn't quite hit it on the head, but we're in classrooms told not to question but to accept. Not just because the teacher may believe that this is the truth, but because the teacher is also invested in what he, she says. This is her now, has become him or her. Melted into the self-image, what I have just lectured on or passed on as the truth. And if that is questioned, I'm called into question. And I can't bear that because I need the support of my self-image, which is now connected with what I put forth. So this is how we've been brought up. Don't question the teacher, the parent, the priest, the God, the scripture. And it may arouse not little anxiety to feel one is on one's own and doesn't have the security of belief that everything one assumes is true may not be or can be questioned. This all of a sudden makes everything feel wobbly. And one may want to retreat to safer ground where one has something or somebody to follow, some system to conform to, which is feels so safe, takes care of the anxiety of being on one's own. This is why we treasure systems. We demand them, and as we demand them, they are supplied to us. As we demand authority figures, they grow up. We create each other mutually. That's why it's so nonsensical to put blame just on a dictator who's done and brought about all this. There's also all of us who want to be dictated through too. It may not always be true because the person in power may have the weapons of power to control rebellion. But having lived myself through the whole German era, 12 years era, having seen umpteen movies about it, documentaries, it's so clear how what grew in this one person was demanded by thousands and thousands, maybe millions of people. To be somebody, to have somebody to follow, to be taken care of, to be part of something that's successful, glorious, uplifting. With a myth pervading it, of superiority of one's own race and so forth. It was not at all a unique case, a special case, which is often said and written about. It had extremes that had never been reached before. But the whole process itself is going on all over the world. And maybe in our own home, we have to look and wonder and not be afraid of what we may discover if we don't assume or take for granted that we are democratic or whatever we call it. So dangerous to have words for ourselves and our relationship and hide behind the words. But first one has to become aware that this is going on and not take it for granted anymore, to question it. How are we related to each other? One person just wrote me in a letter. This person is taking a training in psychology, and in one of the seminars in which they were counseling each other, the students, a video was taken of both being a counselor and being a counselee. And this person was absolutely deeply shocked about seeing herself on that video. She's very open, very ready to see that. She said, now I understand for the first time why I have the difficulty of getting along with people and how I impress people, how despotic I am, how I talk in fixed statements, how pushy. Now, do we all need to install videos? We can't. It's too expensive. But it's not necessary. I'm not saying that wasn't a good aid in that case. I'm not knocking that. But it is indeed possible to be aware how one talks to someone else. If from the outset and freshly every moment one doesn't take for granted that one knows how one is. I am gentle-worded or mild-mannered or democratic or this or that. That one puts aside all of these ideas and imagery and sort of listens with an extra ear how one comes on. We're usually very good in, or some of us are very good in seeing how the other person comes on. But one has to look here too. If one only looks at the other person, sees his, her difficulties and is able to express them, and then one may make a good therapist, I don't know. But there has to be equal time, equal transparency inside. As one counsels, as one talks or scolds or demands or complains. Transparency to the whole dynamics of what is going on in oneself. The need to do that, the investment in it, the investment in an image of being what one wants to be. The tremendous power of the self-image or ideas about oneself in our relationship. That's possible without getting a replay on a video, although it's probably dramatic. But then not everybody may respond and react when a video is present as one does when there is no such device. One may become self-conscious with a device there. Meaning I got to be careful how I come out on that tape. I want to look good. Somebody asked, said, I've read a lot of your newsletters and your book. How do you come to that seeing without knowing? How do you get there? How can you develop it or attain it? Are there any methods? Most of the time when we go someplace to a training center or encounter place or workshop, seminar, there are methods and techniques presented of how to use the mind in order to get to a state that is also talked about, a goal of having more peace or enlightenment or more decisiveness, better feeling of self-worth, whatever the particular seminar or workshop may be about. The goal is delineated and the way to get there. Here, one may think the goal is to see without knowing. And then what's the way to get there? But see, we don't operate this way. We said last night, what is offered is the earth and the sky, the birds and the wind. A large room, good food, a talk a day, and meetings. Maybe I'm leaving something out. Yeah, I'm leaving lots out. But there's no goal in that, is there? And there's no method or technique in there, is there? And there's a reason for that, because if a technique is offered, then the mind concentrates on that, focuses on it, and the openness of awareness isn't there. Focus is always on something particular. And with it, the battle of what may get one off of the focus. The battle with distractions. But here we say, what are the distractions as it comes up? And don't call it distraction any longer, but see what it is. This is now what is important to find out. What is happening in the mind and body, heart, emotions, what one has called a distraction. So to shove nothing out of the way, to be there with a question, with a listening and looking, whatever happens. And to refrain from labeling it distraction and see what it is when this label goes. When the battle with it goes, when one doesn't fight it or wants it to go away. So the mind disentangles itself from conflict. The constant conflict of, I want this, but not that. Or I want this for the sake of that. The technique for the sake of the goal. Then we're just going through one moment after another, like in a train where all the windows are closed. What's happening on the way? What's happening right now? What's there? Inside and out, this moment. If the mind opens up to this kind of looking and awareness and listening, then where is the goal? Where is the future? It's all there, isn't it? But if you think, well, this is not so important, I want something more important or exciting, then there's no attention right now. And just the thought of the more exciting thing to happen, which is sheer abstraction, sheer fantasy, and no contact with the wholeness of being, inside and out. Do you see that? Please, if this isn't clear or is a problem, do bring it in meetings. And this morning, the 10 minutes have worked very well. We didn't have to cut ourselves short. And it's nice if it goes around and one can come in again tomorrow. So if any of what has been said right now doesn't make sense, isn't clear, or one feels it is otherwise, then let's do it. Let's go into it. So how does one get to seeing without knowing? I don't know. Can one listen and see what happens? As one listens to a bird, is there immediately the word bird? Or, if one is a little bit more knowledgeable, the word crow or Ed? Tatri, tatri. It goes like that. Tweet, 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 tweet. What is all that? Do we have to have words? Well, we may not feel we have to have them, but they come up. At least the word birds. But does one see right now that the word bird is an image? Something that comes up on this internal screen, or as we said last time, as somebody suggested, this is a hologram inside the brain. A picture of a bird comes up, or just the word bird, or the word crow, or sparrow, or cardinal, robin. And does one see that chut, chut, chut is not the word? That's simple, isn't it? The word is one thing, but this tatri, that's something else. And the word having come up, cardinal, bird, whatever, nonetheless, can one listen again without the word, even though the word has come up? One has identified it, but one can listen without identification. One can at least ask if it's possible that there's an instant of just what's actually there with no contribution from the computer. All kinds of words or sentences may come up. It's hard, I can't do it. She can do it, he can do it. Just listen to that. Listen to all the stuff that comes up. It's really like on a computer. Comments, questions, commands. You can't do this, the computer sometimes says. It says it differently, but you've chosen the wrong something or other. This is how this mind works, saying, you can't do it. Try something else. Just to hear that, as one hears the bird, to hear the inner commands and comments. And not take any position on it, like, I wish this wouldn't come up. That's also to be listened to. It's another comment, another demand. Is this arduous? The whole arduous or complicated scaffolding can collapse when one just listens to what's there, without immediately knowing. And that capacity exists or can come into being. How? I don't know. Maybe when there's clarity about all this stuff of knowledge and the investment that we have in knowing birds, for instance. We were talking about it in one meeting. If one is a bird watcher, one is to some extent or to considerable extent invested in knowing about birds. And then this investment, this knowledge about birds, has a greater importance, a higher value, maybe, than the actual listening. At least it can take over voluminously. To just see that the self that becomes identified with being something, having some skill, knowledge, becomes very important and takes a lot of space, and then very little left for listening, except to all the comments about oneself and good feelings or bad feelings. Suspense, if one hasn't found the name of this bird yet, the scanner will keep going and going and going. So to be in touch with what's going on inside. And out of that awareness comes an intelligence, an intelligent perception. Which doesn't take sides, which does not condemn or accept. We will end here for today.